Hello, world, or whoever might eventually maybe see this. I think I'm going to plunge into something that keeps haunting me, that I keep trying to disassociate from, and probably it's not going to stop haunting me until I acknowledge there's a part of my past that some people know about, but that I don't always want other people that I know or meet to know about. And there's several reasons for that, which I would like to kind of unpack and think out loud with you. Okay, this is hard for me to say. Okay. Okay, so, well, let's start with this. I grew up in the Midwest. Those of you who know the Midwest of the United States, it's dominated by a couple of different cults. Mormonism and the Evangelical Church, which ironically, the Evangelical Church thinks that the Mormons are cults, and they're not, but they totally are. There's different branches of evangelicalism, and one of them is even called Messianic Judaism, and it's not Judaism at all. It's not. It's just, it's not the first time in history this has happened. I mean, we think about it, the church has from the beginning been doing Jewish cosplay, but there's periods of moments in church history where the church takes it to another level, or groups that do, like the Pilgrims. I think this is partly why some of our founding fathers in America thought about making Hebrew the main language of our country. Thankfully, they didn't do that. They would have totally bastardized Hebrew, and that would have really increased the already phenomenally awful anti-Semitism of the church and its horrific replacement theology, which ironically in the Messianic world, also called the Hebrew roots world, we thought we were better than the church because we were not replacement theology. That's what we thought. That is what we thought. And I thought that I was leaving Christianity when I joined the Messianic cult of the Evangelicalism, because it says Judaism in it. And as a nerd, I was attracted to the fact that people do study more of history and another time and place and culture, and they're learning another language, Hebrew, So I think that's why a lot of people on the spectrum are attracted to that group too, because it's like finally you find a part of the church where you kind of get to shine if you are a nerd. But the bad part is you're probably more likely to uncover the whole ruse and find out that it's a lie. Messianic Judaism is just the evangelical church masquerading as Judaism and trying to do the same thing it's been doing, which is to proselytize the Jewish world. So I was in this movement, and when you're in this movement, some of us discover that we have some Jewish ancestor. For me, my great-grandfather, and also probably on my mother's father's side, and also some relatives on my mother's side, which apparently must have converted to Catholicism when they came to Puerto Rico, because that was the only way to buy land there. That story became so important to me when I entered the Messianic world, because there's two classes of people within it, and you cannot be a member of the largest Messianic organization unless you are Jewish. And the whole thrust is upon dividing people into Jew and Gentile, which it takes on a whole different meaning, right? In the church world, there's no idea of what this actually means in the Jewish world. It's got a totally different meaning. Every term does. Christians don't realize that their Bible is completely different, totally different than the Hebrew Bible. They think that if they read their Bible in Hebrew, that it makes it the same, but it's not. It's like, this is how I would explain it. If you took a cookbook and you used it as a beauty catalog or a car manual, and you developed all kinds of footnotes and lessons for using it that way, it would not matter what language you translated. I mean, it would matter what language you translate, because translations matter, but not in the sense that it wouldn't be the same book. We could say, well, all translations are different books. Yeah, but the purpose of the use of the book becomes completely different. So for the church world, which was created by Rome, the gospel was a Roman propaganda campaign making fun of the Galilean and Judean rebels. And for them, this was the dogma. This became, I don't think it started off as, at the very beginning, I don't think this started off as, here is the only right theology you're allowed to have. I think it became that a few centuries later, with other emperors, Roman emperors. But this is the beginning of it, where the focus is on your credence and your allegiance, and the gospel, if you look at it closely, is very anti-independence. It's telling people who are already being persecuted by Rome, who are paying taxes that are basically starving them to death, to give to Caesar what is Caesar and to God what is God's, which that is a joke, okay? That right there, that statement is supposed to be hilarious in a cruel way, because Caesar was God. And some people say, well, see, this was a contradiction trying to show that he isn't God. Oh yeah, but pay him the taxes as if he is, even though you're literally starving to death, okay? It doesn't... See, when you make it into a statement of, ha ha ha, see, Caesar isn't God, but you're not putting it in the context of Caesar starving people to death when this statement is being made, you just miss how cruel this humor is. The same thing with, turn the other cheek, go the extra mile, okay? Rebels against Rome are carrying the equipment for the Romans, the extra mile, as they invade their land. Carry your cross. Countless people carrying their cross because they're dying, because Rome is killing the rebels. If you haven't read Joseph Atwell's book, and some people refuse to even consider it, it totally disrupted a lot of academia around the New Testament corpus, because so many tenured professors have made their living off of not recognizing that the Gospels are a form of satire. So we've had ages of church theologians and tenured professors who haven't been looking at it that way, and their whole career is built on looking at it some other way. Joseph Atwell comes along, and he does have a very compelling case. I've heard people try to undo his arguments by making up arguments he didn't even write in his work. And that just tells you how threatened people are by it. And when you look at it and you think of it objectively, you're like, oh yeah, this is satire. And that's a whole other subject. But what the Messianic world has done is try to pretend that they are the oldest version of the church. Now, the evangelical church is the newest version of the church. It is nothing like the church has ever been in history. It is so foreign. And this is the Messianic movement. This is where it originated. This is where its history began. This is where its theology is. But they're the oldest, truest followers of Jesus. Made up. So getting back to what I was saying earlier, if you are a research nerd, whether you're on the spectrum or not, and you end up in this world, you may run the risk of finding out the whole charade. And it will not make people happy. I remember when I started to question certain things, my Messianic rabbi, pastor, because it doesn't matter if he happened to be a Jewish, but converted to Christianity. And something that people don't understand is that Christianity is a globalist religion, and Judaism is a nation, a small group of people, it's a peoplehood. Because it's such an ancient peoplehood, it includes a religious identity, but you absolutely do not have to be religious at all to be Jewish. Okay, that's not the way Christians think of what Christianity is, because it's a whole different ball of wax. It's all about what do you believe in, do you believe or not. So the funny part is that the church world talks about how they're not a religion, they're a relationship. But if you, as Christy Burke has talked about in one of her videos, they check mark every box for a religion, and you do have to believe certain things and have a certain philosophy. Yes, there's diversity. That's the funny part. There's so much diversity in the church world. It's reinvented itself a multitude of ways, but still, in the minds of a Christian, there's a certain set of beliefs you have to believe to be a real Christian. Okay, so there are Jews who have converted to Christianity, the few of them, few token Jews in the Messianic world, that offer this false legitimacy to the movement. It's still a church, and it's still doing what the church has been trying to do for ages. It's the longest running ancient political smear campaign. That's what Christianity is. Now, I know that sounds really dark and condemning, because it is. I intend for it to be. I am not happy with the fact that it has taken us so long to realize this dark and sordid history of the church, and that instead, particularly in the Protestant world, we will try to attribute anything dark and sordid about our Christianity past to the Catholic Church. We try to pretend it's not in the Protestant world. We try to pretend that. We try to pretend we're something else. We're the most original. Somehow. It doesn't make any sense. When you look at the history, it makes zero sense to say this. Okay. So I had this Messianic rabbi, as I was saying, that I went to, and I was asking things that he'd warned me. He said, all the people who have asked these things before, they've wandered and they've left the faith. Ta-da! I have! Warning, warning, warning. Don't ask any questions that cause you to figure out this is a lie. I figured it out. So yeah, and it wasn't easy, because when you start to deconstruct even one part of your belief system, you find out it's tied to so many other assumptions and memories and moments in your life. And it's very emotional to tease that apart and realize where that goes. So here's my confession. I was an evangelical. I don't really want most people in my life to know that. Because I did end up migrating out of the so-called Messianic Judaism and into an actual synagogue. But I couldn't become a member because I knew my ancestry that I had clung to so proudly as a way to disassociate myself from the Christianity, even though I was in it, wasn't such that I could claim citizenship in the Jewish world. I could go through a return ceremony because it's close enough I could do that, which is almost like a conversion. It's just very special because it's a return ceremony. It is really cool, the idea. I think I might get into another video why I'm not comfortable with doing it, and it has nothing to do with not wanting to convert. It's just, well, no, I'll get into it right here. If I was single, didn't have kids, didn't have a family, I would probably go through the conversion process. One of the things that I'm hesitant about, though still, even if I was single, is that the idea of a ritual bath, because of how that is so connected with fear and manipulation because of my church experience, it's a traumatizing thing to think about doing in the context of a much healthier concept of just processing your membership and just going through an ancient ritual of joining a tribe, a nation called the Jewish people. So there's so much fear, condemnation, and trauma from my religious past that's associated with baptism, which is also going into a body of water. And just the idea of exposing myself physically when I was raised with all kinds of shame in the church about my body, so much shame. And then just in general, my CPTSD and constant, just the fear of abandonment and harm, because I have gone through every type of abuse in my life, much of it caused by or coming directly from the church world. Every type of abuse. So I have a lot of anxiety about the idea of going through the I don't want to call it conversion. It's not conversion. What do you call it when somebody gets citizenship? It's not even naturalization. The naturalization process of joining the Jewish nation. Another part of the reason why I'm worried about it is because I've already known what it feels like to worry about being second class in the church. I already know what it feels like to worry about being second class as a woman. I worry about joining another group where I would be second class as a convert. I know it's not really a convert, but that's the word I'm going to use, I guess. And I worry about giving up my ownership of my own thoughts and not having to feel like I have to accept the creed and the politics and everything of a certain group that I might join or associate with. In reality, I can see plenty of reason I shouldn't worry about that in the Jewish community. The American Jewish world is phenomenal. I can be an atheist at synagogue, which is awesome. Awesome. That's what I identify as an atheist. Because I know that every idea that we have about God is something that we create as humans. It doesn't matter if you want to say, well, there's an ultimate singularity, an ultimate something, but we can't conceive of that. And so we're never actually talking about it. We're talking about how we idealize our own biases and generational trauma and the narratives of our culture. That's what we're really talking about when we talk about any God and when we give it any kind of name. So in that sense, I'm an atheist. And in that sense, I fit very well into the intellectual world of Jewry. And so I would love to identify with that community and find myself a part of it for that reason too. But again, I've got all of this trauma on the back end. And there's another interesting thing that I think makes me feel almost delegitimized is that I grew up always feeling like I was trying to pass a test with God, a faith test, a belief test. Get it right, or you get it right, you go to heaven. Get it wrong, you go to hell. So, interestingly enough, this might seem unrelated. If you are homeschooled, which I was, and I loved being homeschooled, some people might look at that and be like, oh, that's why she's weird. No, I was weird to begin with. I'm a nerd. I had a hard time in a traditional classroom, and I've always felt like homeschooling saved me. Unfortunately, whether I had been in a traditional classroom or not, I wasn't going to escape the toxic influence of my religious world. Okay. It was there for me regardless. So anyway, homeschooling, you graduate with a transcript and that your parents provide. And if you choose to get a GAD, it's not recommended. Don't get a GAD if you're homeschooled, because that looks like you just dropped out of high school. Okay. So instead of you being able to show off that you actually did all the studies that any student would, whether they did attend a traditional classroom or not, you actually lower your learning achievement status by making it look like you just didn't graduate. And so you got a GED. So oddly enough, that what seems like randomly unrelated issue also feeds into my anxiety about wanting to go through the process of going through an actual Jewish conversion, because I've already kind of floated in and out of the Jewish world as a post-Messianic, still identifying myself as Jewish, but still kind of also not feeling like I was because of this confusing, mixed up world I was in. And so it's like, if I do go through that process, it's like admitting totally and completely out in the open, my life was a charade and I didn't know it for so many years. And that subject, that background is very deeply offensive to people for good reason. Okay, it makes my stomach turn to know that there are Messianics in Israel that have been trying to proselytize while the war is going on, because in their mind, as much as they're trying to pretend they are Jews, they still don't know who the Jews are. They just think that they're a character for their apocalyptic end times narrative. So on the one hand, the church world will pretend to support Israel because they're like, oh, my Bible says to bless Israel. So it's like a lucky rabbit's foot. They don't know who the Jews are. It's like a lucky rabbit's foot in their mind. Bless Israel and I'll be blessed. That whole prosperity gospel nonsense, magical thinking that's all over the evangelical world is the underpinnings of their supposed support for Israel. So it's easily discarded. It's easily flipped on its head as the historic anti-Semitism that's been there all along. I mean, it is a part of it. It's not even a reversal of it. That attitude is anti-Semitic. This idea that you refuse to acknowledge this people for who they are, but you can only see them through this narrative as this two-dimensional character that fits your end-time prophecy. So yeah. Whew. I was afraid to say all of this and get this off of my chest because, again, these are all reasons why I have been afraid I would just have a harder time fitting into a community that I now really appreciate and would love to be a part of, i.e. the Jewish world. But I've had a hard time acknowledging my past experience in the evangelical world. I'm truly embarrassed and regretful of a lot of things that I have said and done. Truly horrified by my former belief system. And this video is already long enough, but I would like to make some more videos about some of those parts of the belief system which have really damaged me the most. And there's a lot of different areas to get into. But this is a long enough video already. So there we go. Take care.